Okay.
Feeling good?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'll open up this meeting of the Maynard Planning Board. Today's date is May 28th, 2024, and the time is 7:04 PM. We have 5 members present here tonight from the planning board. This meeting is being held in hybrid format, which means that members of the board, applicants and members of the community can either participate here in town hall or virtually through the Zoom link. Please note this meeting is being recorded. Let's open up item 2, the public hearing, or let's continue the public hearing from about 42 Main Street. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, can you just identify yourself for the record, then I'm gonna ask Bill to give us a little update.
Sorry, Tara Rivers. Sorry about the mask, I dental emergency. Excuse me.
Do you have anyone supporting you tonight?
Thomas Reynolds is here virtually.
Great, Thomas, can you identify yourself for the record?
Thomas Reynolds, Blackberry Studios architect for the project.
Thomas, Bill, would you give us an update where we stand with this?
Yes, well, the board continued this, opened the hearing, the last, meeting of the first one in February. Not February, in, May, but, there's a couple of issues to clear up. I'll let, Ms. Rivers talk about with the police department, which had met with them, and, I think the only other question I had was about some of the graphics for the mural and that. So with that, that's pretty much all there is to it. But just to refresh the board, this is a special permit, not a site plan approval. And it was within the downtown overlay district.
Thank you. Ms. Rivers or Mr. Reynolds, would either one of you like to update us on the items from last time? Any progress?
Yeah, so I believe the last time we met, the condition that we were holding on to was the approval of the security plan from the police department. Since our last meeting, Ms. Rivers had met with the police department and they have given sort of an approval of the plan that we are suggesting. So I believe that we've met that condition and are ready to move forward with this. And the other one was about the artwork, which I believe Ms. Rivers can just give a little bit more information about.
Certainly. So I am working with an artist who is from I know from the North American Indian Center, and we've been discussing the details of the mural, which we are planning for it to be a landscape, vibrantly colored, and having more of a theme with like we're thinking about a river going through it and maybe some animals and such. There was a discussion of there being, if it potentially having marijuana leaves in the mural, although if that is problematic, we can totally leave that out. Just, keeping in mind the nature of the store, but, I'll leave that to your discussion.
That's specifically, I
Okay.
can't have anything with that, and, with the, I hear you right, marijuana leaves in.
We were considering
Yeah.
having that running through the river, but we can totally, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, that one.
We can leave that as a mural that's vibrantly colored and has like a nature theme to it. River running through it, wild animals, and then maybe we could just write the store name on the window itself, completely separate from the mural.
Yeah, I think the way for signage and logos and stuff like that for several types of uses. Can't have anything with it like that, and in the mural, it would be the same thing.
Okay.
So you just keep that in mind.
Certainly.
You're just referencing leaves, not the rest of the description, right?
No, I'm talking about anything to do with the product.
Yeah, right, that's it. Yeah.
I did the same with, remember we had the same thing with, other.
Yeah, but the rest of the description was.
Yeah.
Okay, just want to.
Yeah. They're very sensitive about that, and I think it's in the state,
I do believe that's a state law.
Yeah.
So that's not even our.
We had
purview at all.
something like that before, so, yeah, it's, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So it sounds like the security plan is in progress. Bill, did we get an email from the police department about a final yet?
You're not.
Okay.
Did you give us an update on where it was? I know you met with Deputy Chief.
I did, I met with Deputy Chief Troiano, and we discussed the details of the components I have for security, and he was on board with the ideas and just wanted to be able to have a final walkthrough, before opening.
So what my recommendation would be so far as security plan, is that, you know, I mean, really, it's kind of moot, but I would recommend that we do bake that into any decision the board makes that's subject to.
We're not required, and it's not a purview to review it, it's just part of.
No,
the
we don't
decision,
review it, right. It has to be, approved by the police department.
One other item that I should have brought up last time, and it's my fault, I forgot about it, is that a number of businesses in town that have special use permits, we typically add some type of contribution to the sort of landscape in the area. Obviously, definitely proportional to the business size, of course. A couple examples have been some trees and other sort of landscape plantings. Would you be amenable to contributing some dollar number to say, a tree planting in the future or something similar in the downtown area?
Yeah, certainly.
I was thinking $500 would be proportional to other applicants. Or just be based on the whole circumstances, $500 seems like a reasonable number to me. Would you be amenable to that being before the certificate of occupancy, or would you request that it would happen after the business has already been established and running?
Certainly I prefer after the business is established, however, it's significant. Whether it's before or after, I can quite be flexible on that.
Do you have a sense of when you might start opening?
So I was actually talking to Tom about this, and I, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, but we were discussing potentially, late summer, early fall. Sound about right?
Yeah, the construction on this would definitely not take too much, so we were thinking it would be early fall or late summer, pending any approvals along the way.
I'm thinking 6 months after certificate of occupancy
Certainly.
would be reasonable.
Okay, well, more than reason.
Does the board have any feedback on that proposal?
What are you basing the size on?
It-
What are you comparing?
It's qualitative. I did not do a quantitative assessment of other projects. The thing that I'm considering though is that this is not a site plan review, that this is just a use permit. A lot of the other businesses had site plans included with additional, you know, additional traffic that goes on, so. So I'm just thinking that mitigation is less because of the site plan. Size of the. But not quantitative at all.
I have a question regarding the mural design. How did we oh, I'm sorry,
Can we finish this up?
what?
Well, let's finish up this discussion.
Oh, I didn't hear you. I thought you were done. I thought something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine with me. I don't remember how many, some of the other marijuana shops also put money towards trees.
Yeah,
I
they,
don't remember what they were.
Sugarloaf,
Were a number.
yeah,
There's a number of
number of
trees,
trees.
right?
Sugarloaf put one tree in the well and cleared out the well by the theater.
Yep.
Can't remember the name of the other one in Nason, like you said. Olaf.
Yes. Olaf.
Yeah, he did 2 trees.
Okay.
Rise did, I think 4. Bigger operation. And then we had, when Olaf relocated, we had him do the clock. Keep the clock in repair.
Yep.
And a little area in the front. So in this case, if we have a mural and a contribution to the Yeah, that would be probably more or less about the same. And that's the downtown overlay district, that's any business. We do any business with a special permit. This applies to, yeah,
So, then that'll be the proposal, $500 towards the tree fund set up through DPW.
yeah, and I can just DPW does it and you can work it out with them, we'll just make a. That would be great.
You want to do it 6 months after certificate of occupancy.
Right.
Do.
Um. I didn't hear what the board wanted to, on the mural, in terms of is the mural, did you plan on that going to the cultural district people, or you would just? How would you, is there any way you'd like to do that, or?
I haven't thought about it.
Yeah, I'm a little stuck on. How to make an undefined mural. That's needed to meet the permit criteria. I haven't. Put that in the legalese because. You know, the property could change hands shortly thereafter and be a different mural or no mural or. You know, mural might only be visible 2 hours a year, you know, who knows, but.
This is all theoretical at this point.
Okay.
Right, but how,
Right.
well,
How do
we need to
get to the-
define it
Right.
somehow.
Well, the first thing I would think is we define where it's gonna go. Right, and if we
Okay.
know that's where it's gonna go, and we say, okay, it's gonna be,
So can we
This-
say in the decision,
yeah,
a mural will be created and placed in the front window
Yeah.
of the store?
Okay.
Not to be obstructed by the signage, meaning you
Right.
can put your signage in there, but you're not gonna block the mural with your
Right,
sign.
okay.
Is a mural the whole size of the window? Is that how we define it?
Well, they have to block the window somehow, right?
Right,
So,
yeah, it has to be locked.
say the mural will function as a cultural piece of art and as a
Screen,
screen from the street traffic,
okay.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Can we say that? And
yeah,
are you still concerned about the design?
well, I'm just thinking. Well, we've done other, let me try to think with the other murals we've done. Most people, let's see, we've been through contests and these, I don't know. I don't know, I
Never
guess,
Had anybody to do it wrong, right?
no. No, we did, but they didn't need it wasn't a mitigation with it, because comic book shop put 2 on. El Huipo did the
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
one,
But that wasn't to meet a special permit criteria.
no, it wasn't.
So that wasn't,
Would,
this is to justify the special, help to justify the special permit, so.
would it be good to have one of us look at it? Could we have condition that one of us looks at the final design?
Probably, and maybe with the cultural council.
I don't know if I want to bring culture council on this.
I'm
Okay,
probably the only one on the board with a degree in studio art, so I could.
Your
Keep that
volunteer
on.
services.
Volunteer.
What happens down the road?
It's not
Yeah,
bad.
5 years from now or something when it changes for one.
just has to be maintained in perpetuity, yeah, and we say to a level that,
But I don't wanna require the permit to maintain the specific
no,
art.
no, as approved, say, we just do something like, we said, okay. Acknowledge that the art, first of all, we acknowledge that the mural is also acting as a screening.
Yeah.
So, okay, and we say in the window covering it, the mural topic or theme or whatever should be approved by the planning board or their designate. Natalie, and in the event that the mural changes, just bring it to the planning. Board. If you decide you don't want a fish, you wanna,
We do have annual or biannual check-ins.
Oh,
with
yeah.
anyway,
anyways.
yeah. Yeah, cause they're only 2-year permits,
Right.
so we just say it's right,
For
that's
your
2 years.
awareness, this,
Renewal.
these types of special permits for marijuana
Yeah.
shop is a 2-year special permit, and then every 2 years you need to come back to the planning board.
Right,
The concept here is just to give us an update,
right,
and it's not to go through the same process again.
Mm-mm.
okay,
It's just to say, hey, how's things going?
right,
If things are going well, then it's a very simple process. Maybe it's, maybe we tie the mural to the 2-year,
To what?
because it's only 2-year special permit.
Right, I forgot about that.
So this is not in perpetuity.
No.
In that
For
sense.
the permit and to be renewed, when a permit's renewed. You know, the board can decide
Yeah, check in then.
if they like the design, or maybe they want the same thing or whatever, and that way it. What?
And I'm never leaving this board, so it'll be fine.
Oh, I thought Phil was laughing at my,
I'm glad of that.
my explanation.
What about a change in ownership? Does
Well-
does the permit keep going, or does a new permit have to be established?
No, the permit runs for the owner, it's for the owners.
The
Yeah, so they'd have to
permit
come,
runs with the property or the owner?
Can't be the property,
Yeah.
it's not.
not with the marijuana.
Alright, so if somebody buys it, then they have to come back and get a whole new permit.
It's because it's for the business.
And maybe they'll
Right.
get it, maybe they won't.
Isn't the special permit tied to the business entity?
Well, we changed, Rise changed ownership, remember? And we did them.
We did, and they did come.
Yeah, we had them come to us, yeah.
They came and had to get a new permit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, alright.
they weren't, they changed their name to, I don't remember what they were before, but, Green Star,
Greenstone.
yeah. And well, I'll just make sure I word it like that too, that it changed ownership.
Okay.
We'll just put it in the B.
Yeah, so I like the, approved by planning board or doesn't meeting. That has a lot of flexibility.
I thought Natalie was, I think you're a agronomy major.
We do everything.
I know.
Renaissance.
I know you do.
What else? Anything else? on this?
You're gonna look at the parking?
Do we? No,
I mean, it's in the board's purview to look at it. However, and as DOD, this is first floor reuse.
Mhm.
And we've kind of, the general intent there is to not require more parking if it's a reuse of an existing structure. It was a hairdresser or something before, I think,
It was a long time ago.
yeah, so it was that, it was a little work.
Right.
And there's one or two, there's one spot in the back, right? Yeah. So it's gonna rely on public parking.
Right, but there was discussion last meeting that employee parking would be
Oh, right.
off street.
yeah, on the, either in the River Street or in the other public parking, lots,
And at River Street or where?
or the other public parking. lots.
Okay, not on street is what we're thinking,
Not on
yeah,
street.
yeah. Yeah, that was COA.
No employee parking on Main Street.
Yeah, the River Street should be really easy right there, and
Right,
even works, see River Street.
I know, sure. It's a good one to be.
Okay, any other information?
Can you give us something, are the HCA are you scheduled for that yet?
So we're in negotiations, I got a, preliminary contract to review, and I am, going over that and reviewing that, and we're in the process. of negotiating.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah, I think it's good.
All right, any additional information by the board? It's procedural, I always
Okay.
ask before we close, just in case. Mr. Reynolds, anything else to add before we close?
Oh, no, thank you.
Thanks. I'll open this up for public comments. Seeing no one in the room, Bill, can you see if there's any public comments online? For those online, to make a public comment, please either use the raise hand feature through Zoom or turn on your camera and raise your hand, or just come off mute if you could, and just make a public comment. Thank you. No? Okay, hearing and seeing.
Wait, Jack, did you want to make a comment?
No, okay. All right, hearing and seeing no public comments, I'll close the public comment. And I'll make a motion to close this hearing.
Second that.
All in favor to close the hearing, please raise your hand. You have to vote.
Yes.
5-0 to close the hearing. And I will make a motion to approve the special use permit with the following conditions. That employee parking will not be on Main Street and will be in the town, parking lots such as the River Street lot or the Basin lot. That the mural will be reviewed, and advised on by the planning board or a planning board designee, particularly the vice chairman of this planning board at this time. And that the security plan will be finalized with the police department. And that's the motion.
And change in ownership. Well, I'll make a note that if there's a change in ownership.
And then the details of the change of ownership regarding, the mural and other items. As discussed. And that's the motion.
I'll second that.
Do we need other motions,
That's what I'm looking for right now.
like, to, whether it meets the criteria and stuff?
Yep. On item 6 of the staff report, it gives. everything.
This is the first one we do, and then there's others.
Well, before
Oh,
you vote, you could make your determination, you should make your
I
determination.
did jump the line, you're right.
But you-
You want me to do one?
Yeah, you can.
I'll make a motion to determine that this request meets the criteria for a special permit as described in section 10.4 of the zoning bylaws.
I'll second that. Any discussion on that? Motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion for section 10.4 of the zoning bylaws, please raise your hands in the affirmative. It's 5-0, for the special permit criterion 10.4, Bill.
Great.
Julie.
Hi. I'll make a motion that we determine that the request meets the criteria for the DOD special permit as described in section 9.4.6 of the zoning bylaws.
I'll second that. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor of that motion for section 9.4.6, please raise your hand in the affirmative. That's 5-0 for that motion. The final motion was already made and seconded, which I'll reiterate is the decision to approve a special permit for use of a marijuana retail in the downtown overlay district. Any discussion on that item? All in favor of the special permit use motion, please raise your hand in the affirmative. That's 5-0 for the special use permit. Okay, and that's it.
Okay, well,
Thank you all.
so,
So much, it's so exciting.
so what we do next, I'll be in touch with you, we'll draft the decision.
Okay.
There's an appeal period of 21 days, which in your case shouldn't hold up anything and stuff, and I'll send you a copy
Great.
of it when it goes to the clerk. It's 21-day review period upstairs, 20-day review period with the clerk. And then you want to just check back in and you'll want to get a copy of a certified copy from the clerk of the decision. And I'll go over what to do with it after, but just so you know. That's all there is.
Bill, I'm making a mess out of things tonight. In my motion, I did not add the $500 contribution to the tree fund.
Oh,
That's discussed.
okay, yeah, and so what we should do then? Well, we should just make an amend your motion. We haven't adjourned our hearing.
We have none.
Yeah, so just make a amended motion. An amended motion, not emotion.
I will amend the last motion regarding the special permit use for marijuana retail to include a $500 donation by the applicant to the tree fund that is overseen by the DPW within 6 months of certificate of occupancy.
I'll second.
So that's a second to amend the original motion. All in favor to add that amendment to the motion? Please raise your hand. So it's 5-0 to add the amendment. Do we need to revote on the motion, right? All those in favor on the full motion of the special permit use with the amendment, please raise your hand and confirm it. Good. I mean, now we're done.
Okay.
Now, we'll close the hearing. Can I close?
Yeah.
Um. So just close the hearing.
We can just close the public hearing, right?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
All in favor to close the public hearing, please raise your hand. It's 5-0 to close the hearing. Okay, and we're done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank all of you. Thank you so much. It's super exciting. I can't wait.
Yeah, we are too.
I'll be in touch.
Okay, all right.
And please keep me in the loop for anything we've got, you know, with security, HCA, anything like that.
Yes, definitely. And,
Okay.
and bring a sketch of the mural for sure too.
Right, and Natalie will be your contact.
Okay.
I like art, so
Beautiful.
I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, it's like art.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds.
Oh, thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. So, okay, Mr. Chair, that's one.
Should I answer this? That's all.
No, you're not. You're doing great.
I had about that, I had about 500, we discussed it, so.
We caught it.
Good, all on track.
Okay, let's move to item 3. This is not a hearing.
It's not a hearing.
This is, just an update. And so I'll open item 3, not a hearing, but this is, Powder Mill Corridor Initiative Study Area. This will be a progress report from MAPC, and I believe you have Sarah Scott here with us tonight.
Yeah.
Hi, Sarah, can you hear us?
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
I can, Sarah. Would you mind just, introducing yourself for the record?
Sure. My name is Sarah Scott. I am a regional land use planner for the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission.
Thanks,
Sorry,
Sarah.
Metropolitan Area Planning Council. I don't know where commission came from.
Thank you. So I was on a Zoom meeting with Sarah and Bill and Julia a few weeks ago, asking about what level of detail should be provided tonight. So I gave feedback on the level of detail. Specifically, I said that I would like to see more detail regarding the design guidelines on this. Where we're at standing with the design guidelines and obviously, the larger overview of the remaining districts in the area. So if you do not like the level of detail on the design guidelines, you can blame me for that. Not Sarah. Sarah is, I'm going off my guidance, just. Bill, do you want to update the board on this and then turn it over to Sarah?
Sure. Sarah, I made you co-host too, so you should be able to use your PowerPoint. This is the end of a second grant that we've had with MAPC to create a powder mill overlay district. Since we began this initiative, we've decided, as you all know, to divide the overlay district into sub-districts. The sub-district A was designed to meet our MBTA criteria and to fulfill our obligation to the state. So now the remaining right now we have the 4 draft sub-districts are what's before this board. We had planned on going to town meeting in the fall. That's totally up to the board. I mean, assuming we have a fall town meeting, I believe we are, but. And so Sarah, the purpose of this tonight was for Sarah to kind of give us the drafts so far. And now that we're working separately from Acton, who also passed theirs overlay district. Now to kind of give us a very good blueprint that's well underway to work from. So that's the purpose of tonight. This is not a hearing for these articles, but this is just kind of to hand it off from MAPC. And MAPC's been with us now over 2 years and they've been fantastic. And I think that's everything. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Thanks, Bill, and thanks, Chris. I appreciate the context. I have a little bit more context that I can share in terms of the project background, but I believe that folks on the planning board have been part of this project before. And the last time that we came and presented on the project was last September. So the context hasn't changed, but we have evolved the project a little bit. So wanted to kind of share an update about that with you. And as Bill said, really just kind of give you a snapshot of the progress that we've made so that you can feel confident that the zoning is going to be in a good place for when you're ready to pick up the formal adoption process.
Sarah, can you confirm? I just want to make sure that that it's being shared with the online attendees. Yeah, okay, good.
Okay, everyone can see that?
Yeah, I'm just making your face small so that way we can see the whole PowerPoint.
That works for me. Thanks.
There you go, continue.
Okay, so just a brief recap. The project had started with what is now called the Phase 1 redevelopment strategy. This was the Connect Powder Mill Road study that was done starting, I think, in 2019, with the report being published in 2022. And this was a joint effort between the towns of Maynard and Acton, looking at the 1.5 mile long stretch of Powder Mill Road and really trying to think about a future vision for redevelopment in the area and looking at the corridor as a whole, straddling the two towns and really trying to think about how the towns could work together to create a vibrant sense of place along Powder Mill Road. There's a link on the bottom to the project webpage, which is the same project webpage for the information about the zoning. But if you wanted to read the full redevelopment strategy, you can find it there. And this map just shows the study area for that initial report. There were 4 main recommendations that came out of the report. The main one being to create an overlay zoning district that would shape future development, because one of the things that we heard was that there was kind of this hodgepodge of different base zoning districts in both Acton and Maynard, and that there was a desire to try to have more of a sense of cohesion and also to really kind of have higher standards for development in this area to push it to be more mixed use, more walkable, really kind of more of a destination. Along with that, there were kind of 2 main components. One was what we started calling river access, which was this idea of improving access to the Assabet River as well as the environmental quality of the river. So kind of thinking about physical access as well as kind of like environmental access. And then the other being complete streets and having transportation infrastructure and future transportation projects that are designed for multiple modes of travel, whether it's pedestrians, bicyclists, transit users, folks who are driving in cars, and really trying to help make the corridor safer. So in Phase 2, what we've been doing is try to take those recommendations and put them into action by developing a draft zoning bylaw for overlay districts in both Maynard and Acton. And as Bill had mentioned, what we started doing was working together with the 2 towns to take that kind of broad recommendation from Phase 1 and really turn it into a vision. And that's where the idea of the sub-districts came from, and the different sub-district typologies, and kind of honing in a little bit more on the sense of where the standards might end up. And that's pretty much the phase that we were at when we saw you in September. And really the goal of this work is, as I was mentioning, to create a more walkable and safe Powder Mill Road. So what we've been doing through this phase is this kind of 3-part process of developing zoning, starting with the broader recommendations of what we want to go into the zoning bylaw, and then narrowing that down into specific standards. And then from those standards, crafting the entirety of the draft zoning bylaw. So thinking about the structure of the bylaw, thinking about what are the references that need to be made to the existing zoning ordinance, and things like that. So the zoning would be ready to be adopted at town meeting. As part of the recommendations and standards phase, we did a few different rounds of community engagement. We did public meetings, we did the public presentation at the planning board. We had an open house that I know a bunch of you came to, which was great. We had some surveys online. For this bylaw part, it's really just been more kind of taking everything that we've heard through this process and crafting zoning that meets those goals. As I mentioned, what we are developing is an overlay zoning district, so we are not proposing any changes to the base zoning in Maynard. We are also proposing an optional overlay district, so that means that property owners would be able to choose if they wanted to redevelop their property under the base zoning or under the overlay zoning. The idea is that the overlay zoning would have the basics, the use standards, the dimensional standards, but they would also have building and site design standards that would guide the form of development a little bit more than some of the areas of Maynard have right now. And like I said, trying to make sure that the standards are coordinated between the two towns. So these were the proposed overlay subdistricts that I believe had been shared back in September. As Bill said, the idea with the subdistricts was that we recognized that Powder Mill as a kind of larger place really contained these unique sub places within it. And so the subdistricts were a way for us to recognize those different conditions on the ground and also recognize that future redevelopment might look a little bit different in these different parts of the corridor. And so really trying to kind of balance knowing what the existing conditions are and what may or may not change, while also recognizing where there's more of an opportunity for redevelopment. And one of the changes that was made since September is we changed the subdistricts from numbers to letters, and they now go from right to left instead of left to right. So if Bill sent you a last minute revision to the zoning language, it's because I got myself messed up when I was doing the left to right, right to left translation. So we now have A, B, C, D, and E, but still the same 5 subdistricts, same boundaries.
We like to keep you on your toes.
Yeah, exactly. As I mentioned, the overlay zoning includes use regulations and dimensional standards along with parking, which are all kind of part and parcel of the standard zoning bylaw. The housing affordability provisions that apply townwide, the inclusionary zoning, that also applies to the Powder Mill overlay district. And then we added in some extra design guidelines and environmental standards in order to respond to what we had heard from the different community engagement touch points around those 2 topics. These are the proposed subdistrict standards. And again, these haven't really changed much since September, but just wanted to kind of go through it one more time. So again, just noting that subdistrict A is now that easternmost district. I revised the presentation when I realized that I had mixed myself up. And so I added the map back in to help folks follow along a little bit better. So one of the changes that we did make is that subdistrict A is now the 3A district. We had initially thought that the 3A district would be parts of subdistrict B. But given the real potential for redevelopment in that area, it seemed like it was a good candidate for satisfying the 3A requirement, the MBTA Communities Act requirement. So the zoning in subdistrict A allows that type of higher density residential, but it also allows commercial buildings with large footprints, such as the existing commercial building that's already on the site that could possibly be redeveloped for a similar type of use. Subdistrict B is that area in brown, which is mostly on the south side of Powder Mill Road. And this is an area that's really limited to residential uses, so also allowing a higher density of housing and multifamily housing, but would be a strictly residential area. Subdistrict C is what we're calling the neighborhood residential area. So again, really trying to maintain the residential feel that is already in those, already on those parcels. But recognizing that a lot of those existing properties actually don't conform to zoning. A lot of them have lot sizes that are too small, or they have much smaller setbacks than what's allowed. So in a way, we were kind of right sizing the zoning to give those property owners the ability to perhaps change a use or add a mudroom, or, you know, those kinds of small changes that allow folks to stay in their property. So trying to kind of allow that while also allowing a slightly greater diversity of housing types than what's there now, but still maintaining that kind of small scale residential feel. Subdistrict D is what we're calling neighborhood business, which is what I would consider more of like your traditional mixed use idea, where you would have ground story, commercial, probably retail uses, and then upper story residential uses, really trying to promote walkability and trying to promote destination uses for folks as well. So thinking about people who live along the corridor and might want to go to the grocery store or go to the pharmacy, but also folks who live outside of the corridor and would be interested in going to a really cool music shop or going to a great play center for their kids. And then the last subdistrict is the Village Center subdistrict. So this is the connector between the downtown overlay district and the Powder Mill Road corridor. So recognizing that it kind of has a foot in both worlds a little bit. So similar to subdistrict D in terms of the mixed use and the walkability, but slightly different design standards just to acknowledge the different types of parcels that are in that area. So that's kind of a quick tour of those subdistricts. One of the things that we iterated on in the past few months was the building and site design standards that Chris had mentioned. And so this is a way for us to kind of continue that tailoring of the approach. I know that this map looks a little busy, but bear with me. I think that it makes sense if you walk through it. So the idea with the building and site design standards is that we basically created 3 different thresholds. So there are standards that are applied to all lots, so every single parcel that's within the overlay district. And then there are standards that only apply to lots that abut Powder Mill Road. So that's really where we're thinking about wanting sidewalks and wanting street trees and wanting building facades that are visually interesting and having windows on the ground story so folks can see into the activities that are going on in the building. So lots that abut Powder Mill Road would have to meet all of the standards for all lots, and they would have to meet the standards for lots that abut Powder Mill Road. And then the third threshold is for lots that abut the Assabet River. And this was part of the conversations that we were having around environmental improvements and river access. So thinking about the unique development potential of those parcels, and also opportunities to really enhance views of the river, to enhance physical access to the river. So lots that abut the river would then have to follow those standards. So you can see the different hash marks show what would apply on each parcel. The horizontal lines are for the parcels that would just have the base standards, the standards that apply to all lots. You have the kind of like check mark, like hatch, which you can see on the prime storage warehouse parcel. So that type of hatch is for properties that abut the Powder Mill Road. And then the kind of like slanty rain diagonal lines that you see mostly in subdistrict D and E, those are for parcels that abut both the river and Powder Mill Road. So if you look at those different thresholds, and then if you also look at the different subdistricts, there's a number of different combinations of how these various standards would play out. And I think that that's a strength of the zoning, because it really helps to encourage place-specific redevelopment. So as I mentioned, standards for all lots include some standards for having walkways and pedestrian connections. There's some standards around historic structures and review of redevelopment where there are known historic structures by the Historical Commission. There's some provisions for sustainability and also for green stormwater infrastructure. For lots that abut the Powder Mill Road, the standards include sidewalks and street trees, like I mentioned. Also requirements for pedestrian plazas and pocket parks, which was something that Acton had really championed. And then standards for the location of driveways and parking lots, both for the urban design aspect, but also for the improved safety and walkability in terms of having less frequent curb cuts and smaller curb cuts. And then also just generally looking at building design and siting. And then for lots that abut the river, the additional standards that apply relate to river access, vista pruning, and building siting. The other two things I'll just mention that are included in the overlay zoning are housing affordability and parking. So as I mentioned, the townwide inclusionary zoning is required in all sub-districts. We are also trying to expand the option of having accessory apartments, but again, we made that decision by sub-district based on the lot characteristics and the usage of the kind of existing parcels there. And then for parking, we tried to lower the parking minimums for all uses to be closer in line to the downtown overlay district. So I believe that all of the parking minimums for commercial uses align with the downtown overlay district. And then for residential, we are requiring 1 parking space per dwelling unit. We also added in some requirements for electric vehicle charging infrastructure and for bicycle parking. So that's kind of the overview of where we were going with the standards. And then in terms of the zoning language itself, which is really where we are now, I was going to actually just stop this screen share and share the language itself and just do a quick walkthrough and then lead you into discussion. Okay, can everyone see the PDF?
Yes.
Okay, great. So what we did in terms of the zoning language was we took the framework and the existing language that the town had put together for the PMOD A subdistrict, which passed at town meeting. Congratulations to everyone. And that satisfies the 3A compliance. So the first few sections are unchanged. Sections 9.7.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, all of that is unchanged. Oops, sorry, that went by quickly. 0.5, 0.6, that's all unchanged. In the 0.7 section about subdistricts, the only change was adding in all of the parcel numbers to each of the subdistricts here. And there's a lot. There's a lot of really small parcels in subdistrict C. So for 9.7.8, the dimensional requirements, again, we kept the same structure. We just added in the requirements for the 4 remaining subdistricts. We left the requirements for subdistrict A that had passed at town meeting. With parking, same thing. The parking is going to apply to all subdistricts equally. It just will vary by use. We also added in a provision for requiring bicycle parking spaces. This language is taken from the language that Acton has. They have some very specific, detailed requirements. So we kind of took those and went just a step higher to have a slightly higher level of requirements. So that's one thing we can talk about today is, as Chris was saying, is the level of requirements kind of where you'd like them to be in terms of making sure that that applicants will comply and kind of produce the outcome that you're looking for, while also making sure that the requirements are not overly burdensome for applicants, but also for staff and the planning board who are doing these reviews. To the section 10 about permitted and prohibited uses, again, we added in the columns for the other sub-districts here. And then really the biggest difference is this section on site and building design standards. So this is where you'll see how it's structured, where this first subsection is the set of standards that apply to all new development on all lots. And so those go through the 4 that I had mentioned. And then this section is for standards that apply to new development on all lots that abut Powder Mill Road. We did exclude multifamily dwellings that are allowed as a right in the subdistrict A from these standards, because the way that the 3A compliance guidelines work from the state is that you can't have anything in your 3A district that you don't require townwide. So, so we made sure that there is an exception for these standards and also for the bicycle parking, I believe. And then the last subsection here is for standards that apply to new development on lots that abut the Assabet River. So that is the gist of the zoning language. I put together a few questions for discussion, just things that I would be interested in talking about. But, you know, also happy just to kind of get your general thoughts, comments, feedback. As Bill said, where we're headed next is really trying to make sure that the bulk of the zoning is in a good spot. MAPC will be bowing out of this project by the end of June. So then it will be town staff working with the planning board to get this through the adoption process. So I want to make sure that before I leave you at the end of June, that you feel like we have done everything that we can to set you up for success. So maybe Bill, Julia, I'll turn it over to you to facilitate discussion.
I'll just say thank you, Sarah, for all the hard work and effort. That was a very, sorry, I'm lost with words tonight. That was an excellent presentation.
You're just so moved by our work.
Zoning makes
Okay.
everyone speechless.
Yeah.
Looking for the right adjective, I had none tonight. So I just want to highlight that one point. I think it's going to be helpful for this planning board. If there's anything we can request from MAPC for any small follow-up that can be done in short order, I think that's a good thing to think about. Regarding our feedback tonight, if that makes sense. Yep. Okay, because we do have MAPC available just for a little while longer. So if there's anything else that we would like to ask down tonight. Yes.
I would ask that you start with clarification questions before you go into like recommendations or opinions. That way we can get those out of the way.
That sounds great.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. Sarah, can you put those questions back on the screen?
Oh, sure, sorry.
Those are good.
The
The
discussion
first question,
questions.
yeah, the first question was actually a question I had. And I thought it'd be a good starting point.
What are you able to see now?
You can see it, it's just, it went from being, full screen to, yeah, you can just zoom in.
Oh,
That
okay.
works.
Is it okay if I zoom in just because I have to split screen so I can take notes?
So one thing I saw in here is new construction as terminology, but I kept thinking about renovations. And so your question is, how do you define new development? Would that be any type of building permit?
I would leave this up to the board and the town to decide in terms of if there's already a threshold at which your review is required for certain types of projects. But also thinking about from the staff level, what kind of staff review is done for projects as well. Because the way that we've structured the zoning is requiring site plan review for pretty much everything. Bill, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But so I think I would leave that up to whatever the town and the board thinks makes the most sense and would kind of capture the fullest spectrum of possibilities.
I think what we learned from, for example, like 86 Powder Mill Road, so the co-op, that wasn't a redevelopment. It didn't meet those, it fell through some of the cracks. And so we did, our best, or you did your best to try to ensure that there were certain things that were kind of collectively caught without, for example, like having them repave the entire parking lot, or we had them kind of redo some of the parking, but for the most part, it stayed the same. And they had to then do some stormwater stuff, but that was under conservation. So if you think about that project and then some of the other kind of potential developments along the river, most of the stuff will fall under that new construction because most of the lots will just need to be new construction for like a mixed use or to get those. But we do have a few of these buildings that could be potentially redeveloped. And so do you guys want to have a threshold? And how do we define that and how do we make sure it's equitable? You know, that we're not going after one developer versus another.
And I'm staying on that property, this is a good example. The way the zoning's written now.
Mhm.
Would it have to be the whole property that would have to go under the overlay district zoning, or could someone come in and try to do a use permit for the overlay? For that, on that property?
The way that we had structured this was that it would, any property. A parcel, you wouldn't mix or match.
So the whole parcel would have to be under the.
Yeah, otherwise it becomes unwieldy.
Exactly.
The other thing I'd point out is when we're talking about. Site plan review right now is already defined, you know, that would stay the same. We're not saying it's gonna be more burdensome or anything like that. But what would, the one thing that. When we're talking about rehabilitation or redesign of existing property. You know, it would fall under the current bylaws for conformities or non-conformities, whether they're existing, not, not existing. So potentially, you know, there could be a ZBA approval on some of these that might not even come to this board. And there's a threshold, you know, I think it's 30%. Of a construction of 30% or greater. A renovation, I think, has to, you know, go to zoning board as well. So all that would stay the same. But a new property, like this,
So a property owner would have to designate essentially that the parcel. That they would want that to be developed now on the overlay district.
exactly.
They would then go through the overlay district process. It would also potentially include site plan review, but it would also include some of the design standards that are listed here.
It
depending
would,
on its location.
yes, so it would be, that was the intent, was that there would be an incentive. If you want to do this, go ahead. If you have a single family home. And you wanna put a porch on. And it doesn't conform, you're gonna have to go through the typical process you'd have now, but might never come before this board and might not be. Participating in the overlay district.
That's where we, you know, we're doing some fun things in the zoning, with these minimum maximum yard setbacks, or yard requirements. So we take the co-op, for example, again, they had to go to, every board, but to DBA to build a deck in the back. And so, you know, in this case, they probably would have still, I don't know, how close. Well, it was weird,
But
weird
you're
shock.
saying potentially this is trying to eliminate the multiple permitting.
Yeah, so it would have allowed them, like, for example, if they chose that overlay district now, if that was in place, then they probably could have built. To size to be able to not go through zoning, or through the zoning board. But then we also, you know, would have gotten like potential more access to the river or more green infrastructure on the site. Through planning that, you know, we couldn't necessarily push through conservation because of those things. So that's what we, the goal is that we're giving enough incentives to the developers that they want to do the overlay district, but we're also getting a lot of benefits out of it as well.
So I'm a little lost on. Parcel like the plaza that the co-op's in. And say one of the tenants had a change of use that was only allowed on the overlay. And so they wanted to do the overlay. How many bicycle parking spaces would that site be?
So
Based on the tenant or based on the full property?
could a tenant come in for a use permit under this overlay? Would it have to be the property owner itself?
It would
Property
still
owner.
be the property owner. So for example, like the co-op didn't come into the co-op, that was under Hoffman Development, that permit. They were technically the applicants. So. Yeah, that's what you're saying, they would have to go with the entire site.
That's what I agree, I think that would have to be.
So then they would choose one use permit on the property. using the overlay district, but now they're an overlay district property, is that
Yep.
the concept here?
And then they would have to conform,
So now they got trees and
Yep.
bikes,
sidewalks, all those things.
everything.
So your original question is how many, as an example, you asked, how many bicycle, what was it?
Bicycle.
Yeah,
So
so-
bicycle parking is percent of car parking.
right.
So I guess bicycle parking would be based on,
Whole property.
God help me, the existing spaces or the required spaces, I don't know, but.
You know what I was getting.
Yeah.
I do, yeah.
All right, but the thing is, yeah, so you, if they. They do it applies to the whole property, even if it has a variety.
That's something you should look at, you should look at these two, Matt.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just wondering, yeah, what the board's thought is.
I don't know, I don't have a thought on it yet.
What the
I think it's easier that way. I think though. It may be more difficult to have some things happen. Because it's like, well, I could change that use, but I'm not gonna, put in 12 new trees and. New drainage and stuff like that.
Sure.
New tenant.
But remember, the uses the uses that we're trying to add are to be an incentive, in other words. They're supposed to be enticing enough to make that worthwhile. You're not saying like, okay, we're gonna add a use that is. A lot of stuff is already permitted in the business district, for example.
Right.
The mixed use zoning now, maybe, or whatever the case may be. It would. Probably be something that would be enticing and would be worth it, but I see your point, I get it totally.
Well, from an owner standpoint, I don't see anything enticing in here. It's like, okay, maybe I can get a different kind of tenant, but that means now I have to meet site and building design standards, so forget that tenant.
But you're thinking in terms of something that's already constructed.
Yeah, which
Right.
the whole place is.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right.
And that's my other thing, are we seeing, all these building design standards, the word is new development. So
Yeah.
are we thinking that is change of use? Or a use that's only allowed in the overlay?
I think this would, I mean, it's something we would wanna hash out more, but I would think that this would be physical, the structure. And the use of the structure, but if you're. New development,
So to pull up the platform on the back, portion on the back triggers. it.
That would
I'm just
be-
saying there needs to be
Yeah.
a definition of it.
yeah.
And
I don't
that's,
think we have it yet.
that's what
Absolutely,
exactly what we need from you guys.
right, that's the way,
Is that threshold. So if you want it to be. Like more, the physical structure be changed and that's what kind of sets off that new development, or do you want it to be change of use? But if they do, change of use, then, so. We were trying to constantly balance that, like, we don't wanna put an extra burden on the existing, business owners and, property owners. However, we do wanna encourage certain uses, so, what would you favor?
and to be clear, time wise, the fall is what I thought was a goal, but. If we're not comfortable in the fall, we don't do it, we keep working on it till it's right.
We're never gonna make the call, but.
Well, but I mean, there's no sense putting up an artificial deadline. I mean, we know how we can get stuff done well, like we've done on other stuff. And if we need more time, we need more time. But these are great questions, and this is the kind of dialogue that we need to maintain and establish. But I think those are really valid points. And the intent. I mean, one of the big intents, my.
What can Acton do? In regards to design standards and triggers for that?
That's a good question. Sarah, are you familiar with that?
That is a good question. I will see if I can look that up.
Pretty sure it's physical development of the structure. Oh,
I have it printed out.
Oh, good.
Nice.
wait a one
I was
up.
like 10% footprint change or what was it?
Am I great that they went with structure?
Hang on, I'm holding, wait.
But I guess, but the one thing, well, my point was that one of the initial concerns was that having this assortment of zoning districts, if everybody developed what was allowed by that zoning on the parcels, you know, you'd have a mishmash, a continuing. And a lot of stuff would never come before us. This was a way to bring it before us too, so I would think we would want to continue with that, to maintain the consistency, but these are great issues that we have to delve into further. No question.
So just to hone in a little bit, it sounds like we're talking mainly about sub-district D, the commercial sort of area, right? And E
Well-
perhaps.
No, design standards are by
Oh,
location.
so the design standards are, but we're talking about uses for like a new business or something like that, or a change of business use. It was the examples we kept giving. Right?
Oh, yeah, but,
Yes, in your hypotheticals. So.
well, I mean, the word new development shows up in the building standards,
It
which
does
is
too.
not the ABCD, it's the river powder mill.
Right.
Not powder.
So it looks like Acton used the language new development, which is probably why I used the language new development in the Maynard zoning. So then the question is just how Acton defines new development. And I don't know if that's already defined elsewhere in their zoning bylaw. But I can reach out to Kristen in Acton and Bill, maybe I can facilitate a conversation with all three of us, because I hear what folks are saying, and I do think that it makes sense that if it's just a change of use, and if there isn't a change to, for example, the building footprint, if there isn't like site disturbance, essentially, then you're kind of looking at a different threshold. And I think that the idea, as Julia was alluding to with the changes of uses that we're allowing, is that we really want this to be a vibrant area. And so I think that that's a good way to thread that needle.
Well, I mean, but yeah, for that, on that point, the goal here is. In a sense, land use revitalization, you know, use for spaces, but we're talking about. We're talking about, you know, with the new design standards, re-envisioning the area from a sort of design and layout perspective. So we want to encourage site plan changes.
Yes,
That's what we want.
right.
We need that. That's the whole goal here,
Same way as the DOD.
right? So what I don't want is to incentivize someone just to have a use and not make any substantial changes to the land.
Correct.
That's not the intent here,
Correct. And we could write it like that.
right? So we just need to stay on, for me, I like the goals. And so I want to stay on task when we go through the next handful of months or however long this takes. That the incentives are always aligned for site plan improvements.
Well, don't you think it's the same as we do with our DOD in a way? So for example,
It
right,
is, but what Bill was saying earlier, I kind of agree. I'm not really seeing also where the same incentives are. The incentives in the DOD are more units and density,
they are,
right?
but, and we've used it to achieve the goals of the DOD with primarily new development. But theoretically, let's see, I'm trying to think of an example like that, but I mean,
Well, we had a use permit tonight, which was not a modification of the building that also used the DOD criteria.
yeah, but we called that out one thing we did with the DOD a while back, if you remember, we put in a specific passage that says in the DOD, if you have a use that requires a special permit in the DOD, we look at design. And just to make sure there's a general compatibility, and the purpose was so that we can subject any use of the DOD to the DOD special permit criteria. So it seems to me that might be a good way, I mean, like I said, we just make it the way we want.
So
but-
procedurally, that makes sense, but
Yeah.
but what's gonna be the incentives for people to choose the overlay district?
Oh, well, I mean, same as DOD, I would think DOD, and as I asked Bill offline, this week or last week. When we were doodling, with some of these changes, do we need a different requirement for affordable to create an incentive, or do we use the affordable incentive that we have built into the inclusionary zone? You know, and that's a heck of an incentive. How many, I mean, we know that works, the density bonus works, and the in-scale creation of affordable housing has been pretty successful, I think.
And is that baked in here though? The
Yes.
density bonus?
Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
so,
no, by reference.
yeah, by reference, so, so the density bonus is applicable for inclusionary projects. The other thing that we tried to do in both this zoning and in the zoning for Acton was really having the kind of the base zoning requirements themselves be the incentive. So as opposed to kind of your typical incentive structure where you'd say, for example, you're allowed 3 stories of height, but if you give us something, then you get a 4th story. Instead, the way that we framed this was you get 4 stories and you have to give us these things. And so that way, the redevelopment that hopefully would come out of this zoning is automatically going to give you all these things that folks said that they really wanted. I do believe that the standards that we put together in terms of the uses that are allowed, parking that's required, and the dimensional standards are more amenable to redevelopment even than the DOD. I would not, stake my life on it, but my understanding is that because we're trying to allow a lot of uses by right or by special permit where normally they wouldn't be allowed. And then same thing in terms of allowing just more development potential. It just is more attractive as a redevelopment option.
So you're saying that the building heights and the other dimensional requirements allow for density, and that's the incentive structure?
Right. Basically, we're giving a decent amount of redevelopment potential on these lots. And then in exchange for that, we're asking for the various types of site improvements.
So that makes sense to me. But that is not the same thing as our density bonus units. Philip, this doesn't reference density bonus units, does it?
No, it is subject to an inclusionary zoning bylaw,
Just
which is where our density.
inclusionary zoning.
Right,
Keep in mind, we have 2 density bonuses. We have a special density bonus, a super density bonus in the DOD. And we have a standard density bonus in the overall inclusionary.
What's the standard? Do you remember?
yeah,
It's something like, if you have to build 2 affordables, you can build 2 more markets.
And that's what we did for Powder Mountain. They went with the standard inclusionary
Okay.
instead of the downtown overlay.
Okay,
Yeah, instead of reducing it from 1,500 to 800,
Yeah,
got it,
do it like that. But,
okay.
so I don't see that as any incentive, because that's just existing. But I guess the height thing might be, the parking would be, if we didn't always just give them what they wanted anyway.
for me, I feel like the setbacks was a huge one when we were designing this.
Yep.
We have. That is something that we see often in front of the zoning board, is people asking for setback relief. So, this would be like, okay, we'll give you 5 more feet or 10 more feet on either side, but you have to give us a very specific type of building and trees and sidewalks and all of those things.
So can you walk us through, so the setbacks here, I see max and min.
Yes,
So for the side, for example, it says max is none and min is 10 in one zoning district. That means 10 feet from the property line to the building.
yes.
And the rear. This applies to
Yeah, the rear is a problem.
the rear, I just wonder in terms of the river, right? Because
So that is.
Yeah, so one of the, oh, sorry, go ahead, Julia.
No, it's okay, you go.
That was something we talked about a lot. And one of the things that we did do is in sub-district E, you'll see that there's actually no rear yard setback required. And that's because there's just really not much room on those lots, especially given the existing footprints. And then also just kind of the depth between the frontage along the street and then to the river. We had thought about doing that kind of across the board for all properties that abut the Assabet River. But looking a little bit closer, it seemed like it was really just sub-district E where it would be more of a concern. I think one thing we could add, if you think that it might be more of a concern in other sub-districts, or if you don't want to not require a rear yard setback in sub-district E, is that we could allow either by site plan review or by special permit for the planning board to waive or reduce a rear yard setback if the applicant can prove that doing so is necessary in order to, you know, not encroach on the riverbank and comply with Conservation Commission standards or something like that.
So for example, if you are on, in conservation, we look at disturbed and undisturbed. So, if you look at 2 Powder Mill, I mean, that building is literally like right on top of the riverbank. But it's all considered disturbed, so they're able to build within that 50 foot. They still have to meet development standards, stormwater standards, but they're meeting disturbed standards. If you then go down Powder Mill and you start looking at, like 68 through 70, and those are those like long, like lots that are kind of next to 86 Powder Mill, we have a lot of undisturbed land. So for them to be able to build within 100 feet of the river is gonna be difficult. Within 50 feet is gonna be extremely difficult because that's undisturbed. And so that's where, you know, instead of having what we've learned from 86 Powder Mill is like, they had to kind of go through this rigmarole of ZBA and planning, but then they came to conservation and we were like, well, we're still regulating you, like it doesn't, because their property line is actually in the middle of the river, because the way that the river has changed so much. So that's where we wanted to, instead of looking at like physical property lines, which are done by assessing and have nothing really to do with banks and the differences in how like that's gonna change. Whereas conservation, we look at that bank line that's being delineated, and that can change, and so we would have the power to change that.
So the rear setback doesn't really matter for the river properties because conservation is gonna be the one making that decision anyway.
Yeah, well, DP, yeah,
Yeah, right, yeah, you're gonna be the one saying,
facility.
yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, you can say like, you know, 30 feet. But
Right. It's, right,
if they wanna go closer than that, they'll have to go through ZBA and then, but yeah, ultimately, conservation has the authority to heavily regulate the buildings.
What I'm looking for on the river is some sort of protection of the deeper lots. That, you know, you can't be, I don't care if it's currently, you know, paved or not. If you want something new, you can't be within 100 feet or 150 feet, I don't know. Because I just don't like it when it's like, oh, well, it's already been built, so we get to just build right up to the river. It's like, no, we're giving you a special thing on this overlay, so give us back the river.
So that's where you start to fall into jurisdictional boundaries.
Yeah, but I'm saying we're trying to strengthen it. Conscom is like, oh, yeah, you're within 200 feet, but it's already been built, so you can do it. And we'd be like, no matter what, you can't do it. I don't care if it's already been built, you gotta take it out. And go build your new building.
But you can't do it based on the river under zoning. The AG would not like you basing things off of a natural
moving.
That's fine,
moving
Yeah.
resource.
that's fine.
Oh, but your idea is if you change the setback to be something,
Setback along the river, if the property is deeper than X, the setback is Y. You know, sure, you can go 150 feet back from Powder Mill, but you can't go any more.
I think then that starts to contradict some of the other aspects of the overlay district, which is access and view sheds and. you know.
Well, yeah, that's the other thing is, I'm not as concerned about the building staying, I don't want the building to be on the river, but the point is that I'm more concerned about how to incentivize having public access back there. Be it encouraging building closer to the road. It's so funny. I feel like I'm backwards on this because I don't want the parking behind the building. I don't want the park,
Not on the river.
right, I don't want it on the river.
And this is where we contradict, so.
I know,
You know, like Powder Mill, 86 Powder Mill is a perfect example.
right,
You guys wanted, and 2 Powder Mill, we're just starting to open it up, the dumpsters.
right,
So, you guys wanted the dumpsters as far away as possible, we wanted the dumpsters on the street.
right.
You won that battle. But, yeah, exactly, because you were first. But so we now have developers knowing that, so they can go through you first. Because they know that there are certain things that they will be able to get away with, not get away with, but, they will get things approved easier than if they came through conservation first. We're very much more strict of like, no, you can't put that there, don't put that there, but that's the balance.
Well, so yeah, so we have public access, which is sort of a priority here in some ways, the river, it's even baked into the language here. We do want to help protect the river from a conservation standpoint as well. We do want to incentivize to develop these properties at the same time, so I think hopefully that's not paradoxical.
No.
But hopefully that provides enough tension to have a really, make this even better zoning bylaw.
Well, I think that in general. The approach to the river, the idea was that you would have uses that. Allow a level of public access where appropriate. You would have areas identified that nothing should be disturbed or should be restored or whatever the case may be. And then you may have uses that are passive use, but something that would benefit the public of some sort.
And it has
certainly
enough
look at-
incentives for development to occur, otherwise all those other things don't happen.
That's right.
So that has to occur too. So
I
that
do
can't-
think. Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead, Sue.
I was just gonna say, I do think there could be an opportunity to strengthen or revise the river access site and building design standard. Because I do see the possibility if, for example, you, as Natalie was saying, if you have a building that is constructed so that the parking is behind the building, which is generally what we're looking for. And then if the developer puts a seating bench in the middle of the parking lot and you can sit on that bench and you can see the river, then, they could try to argue, right, that they're meeting the river access requirement. And so we can brainstorm ways to maybe try to work around that a little bit. Like we could say something like it has to be dedicated, it has to be like in a natural setting. I don't know, some ideas.
Is there a way, I was thinking about that with the river access part of it too, like. If these things get developed, like, and I understand it might take a while, if looking at sub-district D. Who knows how many years it may take for all things to get redeveloped, but like. If you just get river access on one parcel on one side and another parcel on the other, is there a way like towns do with? Bike master plans or something like that, maybe that's more involved. But if the goal is like,
Don't say.
but like to have it be like, for example, these long thin lots,
Yeah,
if you gotta walk, I don't know, like in
Wait, the plan won't be a walkway towards the river down the edge of somebody's property on every single one, right? Like that's.
Yeah.
Access.
It might be. the way
No,
it's
but
written.
I know, and that's what I don't want it to be. But why can't we say that word?
the river walk,
Yeah,
So yes, incrementally, you can build one.
Yeah.
If we look at. I forget if you were still with us when we first looked at the Catamount. We still did for like a hot sec.
Yeah.
So if you remember like the first iteration of that project, there was a pavilion.
Mm.
So we weren't the ones who said no on that. CEP was like, absolutely not. So that's where you start to get into those tricky conservation things. I think there is. Yeah, how do we incentivize and when we have these such different laws, and that's what we've spent the past 3 years trying to navigate, and this is what we came up with. Not that it's like the end all be all, and the best answer, but we're, yeah, trying to figure out connection down there that DEP would be okay with, that we wouldn't be, that the AG's office would be okay with, that isn't a taking. And so that's where we put in particularly the language on 3.1, we spent a lot of time on. That the applicant can provide a easement for public access to the town in lieu of a physical infrastructure. And that's to allow for entrance, but not have to like build anything, so that way then you don't get caught in like the DEP of it all, like.
DEP says no because they don't want people.
Because you have to prove that you're under the Riverfront Protection Act, that you are enhancing the riverfront environmentally.
Okay.
So for example, a pavilion, that infrastructure that has to come in on the bank is pretty disturbing to the bank itself.
Right.
So they didn't want that because they were like, wait, are you trying to restore the bank or are you trying to allow public access? So that's where they were concerned.
Yeah.
Well, how would they ever allow a river walk then?
Let's
Yeah,
move this
let's,
conversation along.
okay.
So I think you guys have heard good feedback on the sort of riverfront stuff, right? You can get more, Sarah can get more if you think it's helpful. I feel like there's more, as a team, we need to put more thought on how to encourage the type of access that we want. And how it can still incentivize development, but also be compliant. But there's a lot here, so I wanted to touch on other topics as well if possible, if that makes sense. Is that okay?
I just want to add one comment to the topic that we were talking about, new development. Just something to think about. In my mind, if somebody's going in and they're just reusing the existing building, fine, change use, whatever, done, great. But if there is, a site disturbance, and they want to build 20 cars, parking spaces behind that building, then yeah, we should be acting on that. That should be a trigger. And the other thing is, if somebody is adding a porch to their house, I don't think I want to require them to have an electrical vehicle charging space, so there's gotta be
Well, like,
a minimum build. Something.
but like the examples you had are good examples because you would already trigger site plan review with your first example. Cause you're adding over whatever number of parking spaces are. There's a threshold, so, any use that generates X amount of parking spaces is subject to site plan review. And the second example,
Right, but that's site plan review. I just wanted, like, no, you can't do that under this overlay zone.
oh, well, that's already
You
right.
have your bigger building or whatever, but you can't put extra parking behind it, so they need to know the rules.
Yeah. The second example, with 1 and 2 families like that, porches, different kettle of fish altogether, and it wouldn't come under us anyway, it would.
Be under the base zoning.
It'd probably end up if they did something that was, expanding.
The whole point of the zoning to all these little residential properties is to change the setbacks and things. And if they choose to do that, then they get triggered by the site design.
I see your point.
I don't know that I really want that most of the time.
Yeah, I see your
I
point.
think what we, and Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, but what we tried to do was to basically make this, so it's very much commercial and business focused. Not so much on the residential. We wanted to expand for the setbacks on residential to allow them to stay in place. Add on to their homes or add a deck and not have to do as much. But correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that was definitely the intent. I hear the comments that maybe the intent is not being fulfilled. And that perhaps it'd be good to take a closer look at what some of the applicability standards are in the just kind of general zoning bylaw, in terms of what triggers site plan review and special permit and things like that. And then decide if we need to add something in addition to that in terms of requiring compliance with the site and building design standards. That is maybe more about a certain type of new development that is maybe a certain amount of ground disturbance or a certain amount of net new floor area or something like that. Again, you always come across unintended consequences, but I hear the comment and I do think that we can have that in mind going forward.
It sounds like we could go back, like we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, defining what new development means, and it could be for sub-district too, what new development means.
And we can exclude residential use altogether. Through every district, I mean, we tried to make it so, most of the residential is within one, but,
Right, so for
Yeah.
example, the requirement to have a pedestrian plaza or a pocket park. I exempted residential only uses, so I said that that requirement is only for non-residential or mixed uses. I think we could consider also requiring multifamily that requires a special permit, so that would be multifamily of 17 units per acre or greater. But basically the idea that you are exempting these kind of smaller 1, 2, 3 family uses from that requirement, which to me seemed like a requirement that was asking for a decent amount of investment and also kind of required a certain amount of land area.
So that's the type of conversation I think we need to continue. I would ask
Okay.
that can get taken offline and
Sure.
we can figure it out, but I
I mean,
think.
what do you want? So in order for us to move forward, we just do need some guidance.
I
What are your
think you're
thoughts?
hearing that, the small. Single family residential is not,
You wanna protect them.
not the target here, that's not, I don't, in my opinion, not the intent, the intent is. Let's say one of these residential properties was large enough and someone wanted to put a 7 or 10 unit. Properties, 10 units on that property instead of single family, I think that should trigger this, of course.
Okay, and then just
Right.
keep in mind that also starting July 1st will be in the Office stretch code. So things like electrical vehicle charging stations will be required no matter what
Sure.
under those. So where there is a lot of like, we mention it, there's gonna be a lot of reiteration through the new stretch code as well.
I just, again, I think from my point of view. Small modifications to a single family in the C district,
To keep those exempt.
that's not fully, that's not really fully the intent here, if. If they're changing the whole lot structure, I think that's fine. Or if there's multiple properties that are purchased and then redeveloped, that's what we're talking about, I think, but like. Putting a porch on the back of a single family in C district, I don't think that's the.
So
No, but remember on that, the origin of that was to, how do we protect or enhance the existing neighborhoods that are there already? And one of the things that we identified that makes sense is right now, most of them are non-conforming under the existing zoning, and this was to bring them in conformance to allow them a greater range of uses on the property. So for example, if you have a neighborhood with 5 lots or whatever are quarter the size of what's required under the zoning that was dropped on top of them for whatever reason, this gave them a little freedom, but we could work on that and bake something in there maybe. And maybe we don't leave, maybe we just leave it alone, but that was part of the thinking of that with the single family homes. I'm not thinking about like, you guys, like the ones you're talking about on the river, yeah, there's a long lots, but I'm talking about like, if you have a small lot.
The Glens, yeah.
Yeah, so that was the other thing there. Somebody wants to put the patio on, now they may need to go, as it is right now, they may need to go get a variance from the zoning board to put a patio. I don't know, I'm just, but for example. This was part of the thing we could say, hey, now you have a little more flexibility under it, so maybe we could work on that too, because these are great points you guys are bringing out, and that's what, we need.
So
But
we'll come back with
Yeah.
a definition for what new development is,
Mhm.
a definition for redevelopment. Was there any other, like,
There's
Definition.
thoughtfulness on how to deal with that paradox of encouraging development along the river, but also protecting and conserving at the same time.
that's what we've been doing for 3 years.
I chose the word paradox for a reason. I don't know if there's ever a solution. Can we get to other comments on this? Do others have more comments?
Yeah. Okay, so, the building design and siting. New buildings shall be oriented towards the street and have a primary entrance facing the street. And then there's stuff about windows in the front.
You need to say what section you're.
Sorry,
talking
9.7.11, 2.5. It's on page 11.
That's for one of the,
Yes. I guess, I know, I'm sorry, I'm obsessing about the river. But then if we go to the next section where the last on page 12, the last thing is building siting. New buildings shall be sited to minimize obstruction of views of the Athabasca River from the street.
So you're saying
Where-
those are in conflict?
Well, I'm just, they're both well written. I guess I want there to be a way to. I'm imagining if someone comes into one of these long lots or one of the other lots along the river. And they say, okay, I wanna put in something and I wanna have an entrance to my business at the back of the building.
that's what the party.
Because that's where the parking is, or whatever.
Mhm.
I don't know, I guess I just want more flexibility there, in terms of,
Yeah, so we went all the way, one way,
Yeah.
which was very strict. Just to kind of show you guys what we can do.
yeah,
We haven't really done that in any of our other zoning. So pulling back is, we went all the way. We
Yeah.
wanna see kind of where your barometer is for, we don't need to be that specific. That would be something that you could do on a case by case basis.
right, Yeah.
It's completely up to you.
yeah,
Yeah, so again, this is a little detail that I requested so that we can talk with these.
yes, no, and I'm not, and that's, it's not like a complaint, I'm trying to figure out how we could,
So and we're following, because we work with Acton on this.
yeah,
I mean, so we're following Acton this, but the difference is like, if you look at the rest of Acton zoning,
right,
like, wow, is it really strict? So when
Right.
people go into their planning boards, there isn't as much, discussion, I guess, or subjectiveness, because they're coming in and they're like, okay, here are the standards, we're following standards, yes or no.
Right.
Whereas you guys kind of have to do a little bit more work on trying to make sure that we give vague or standards, and then you guys have to decide. So we could definitely pull back on that. Like, do you also feel the same way about the like window covering at least 60% and then flat roof buildings and all of those?
I don't mind the flat roof buildings and the stepping back, the height, the further up you go, but does that only apply to the front? I don't know, I guess it's just,
Oh, are you saying that we should also prioritize the river side of buildings? Is that
Yeah,
kind of the
kind
idea
of.
here? Okay, so,
because in my mind, that's gonna be relevant, I don't know if it really will be, but wouldn't it be great if it could be, all I know is that every time that the co-op posts a photo of how their business is doing, it's from the deck, it's not from the front. So the point is like, not that the deck is an entrance, but like, I would love it if it could be, if it, in a different world, if you could have an entrance, like. If we're gonna prioritize the river, then I want the back of the building to not look like crap.
So Sarah, just to summarize, the building standards, of course, are, I think, front oriented. Is there, is there a way to ever consider back orientation on building standards similarly?
We could certainly, and I think that, there's basically, so there's kind of two ways we can go about doing it. One is what I would call more of like the outcomes oriented approach. So the standard could be something that is asking the developer to generate a certain outcome. So for example, we could say something like, buildings will be designed to have an attractive facade facing the river. The language can get worded better than that, but as opposed to having a very specific standard that says something like all buildings must have a facade of this style or this amount of articulation facing the river. So it's kind of like what you already have in the zoning in terms of having the special permit criteria. So criteria 3 includes increasing views and access to the Assabet River for the general public. So, I think that there is kind of like Julia was saying, like there's a little bit of wiggle room in terms of just the culture of the board and how you go about reviewing applications and permitting projects. But if you're looking for more specificity, then I think that we could add that to that final section about requirements for lots that abut the river.
Yeah, and I mean, I know it's always tricky to add things that are vague like that, but I don't know, presumably some developers just read through this and they're like, all right, I'm gonna be,
Well, so here, just in a different way, like the design standards that are front oriented. That are usually in sort of design standards. Are because it's about people's experiences from the sidewalk or the front of the building. But the point of you're saying is that the intent, we want people to have experiences. Hopefully good experiences on the sort of backside of the property with the river engaged and the building engaged as well in the design standard, right?
Yep.
So I think that's heard by Sarah and the team.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
I don't know
definitely.
what the solution is to that, but
Well, it's an approach, we would have a similar approach in the DOD if we had a property that abutted Naylor Court or the base and Main Street. I mean, you could have it where you had two.
and we had this conversation about,
You're right,
yeah.
right. So I mean, we've discussed that before. I don't think it's out of the realm possibility at all.
I think something that, I wasn't here during those conversations, but like if we think about like a 115 Main, I know a lot of the discussions around that was, we have a facade, a front entrance, but then we also have this riverfront that we want to embrace, and that's how like the promenade came about, and trying to balance these kind of like two fronts. And so I think for something like the co-op, they have, they like Natalie's saying, they have like two fronts, like they really interact a lot with that back area, and use that as advertising. But if you look at like those 60, 70 lots where it's really long.
Right.
Those are gonna be a different experience. So if we have that, if someone buys like those 3 lots and develops a multifamily or a mixed use, right on the sidewalk. We're gonna prioritize more of their interaction with the sidewalk than we are with the river, since the river is like 200 feet down. So I think we really struggled with this because every single lot is so unique and so oddly shaped.
I think we're asking you to struggle more with it.
Come up with some uses that work better.
Other comments? What do you got?
Well, I just found. So it seems to me like. If you buy 4 lots. Say.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not gonna go into see there's four houses on this street for sale.
Mhm.
I'm gonna buy those houses. Now, I'm gonna come here. And I'm gonna ask the board, okay, so I'd like to build you know, a huge balcony in the back, but now, because I have this huge balcony of, you know, a huge building with, say, a view of the river,
Mhm,
but it's very close to the river.
mhm.
What are the liabilities on that? For the owner or for the town? Or if somebody was even walking through there,
Do you mean like a safety liability?
right,
That would have to be an easement or whatever, I mean,
but this is my property. You're gonna come take my property away? Are you're gonna,
So you would allow, so for example, what we're doing at Two Powder Mill is we're not getting an easement on that property. We requested that the owner allow the public to move about on certain parts of the, I think we're calling it like a riverfront patio is finally the language that we decided. That's very different from like the promenade, for example, which is legal easement, for public to go through. So there are multiple ways you can do it. So like with the co-op, you know, technically that's not open to the public. You have to go through the store, and they have the legal right to ask someone to leave.
but it's river access, I mean, if the town of Maynard wants river access on the asset.
Mhm.
Along the whole river. You're gonna have to get permission from the people that own the property in the back.
Well, isn't that part of like the incentivizing part of it, though? If you wanna build 15 units and not 2, then one of the trade-offs is.
Right.
Providing public
Well,
access.
taking 20 feet of the property in the back. It's like, but then how do I build how do you build your views to see the river for your tenants? Or if you wanna build the patio, you say that, you know, you wanna have the feel of being on the river.
So I think what you're saying is,
Don't forget, the lots are scarce, they're not big lots,
yeah,
it's
So-
very small.
so the idea is, and that's why, you know, in
It is,
river access, we talk about physical infrastructure, but we also talk about like viewing areas. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna have physical access to the river, but you're gonna have a view shed to the river. So you're gonna have visual access.
this is the fruiting. It's a nice section.
Yeah, the pruning is one of our
Yeah,
favorites.
so right now, the language says walkway, path, viewing area, seating area, or other form of physical access that allows views of the Assabet River, riverfront area.
So that doesn't,
That
Yep.
says new buildings.
correct, yep.
So what about that older?
Nothing required.
Well, that's gonna be kind of much more.
That's-
So if you look at, yeah, if you look at like, not like 20 Power. That's the one that's 2 down from Waltham. They're basically like a building and a parking lot, and then
Right,
it's the
that's a-
wall and the river.
right.
So you know, their access is walk to the end of the parking lot and here's
look
your
down.
access, yeah,
Yeah.
and here's your access to the river. That is very different, that's an existing building, so we're not going to, you know, potentially do
Now,
anything there. If
across,
they knock it down,
and if, that's if a developer wants to come in and build, you know. If the developer comes in and wants to build 100 units. If he's not gonna be able to build that on an acre of land.
correct,
He's gonna have to go and. Go to your neighbor, you know, all 4 of you guys and say, I wanna buy you out.
and
If
we,
for that price.
we decentivize that in particular. In the opposite side of
So-
Powder.
That's not incentivized here,
Right.
but there is definitely incentives to purchase adjacent properties of the deed,
Yes.
just right,
Right,
they're not in the single
not,
family,
yeah, not yet,
because the building allowance is different in that.
Right,
in
so
that
some-
sub-district.
yeah, so some. Developers gonna have to come over and say, oh, I'm gonna buy this, you know, section B out. And build a beautiful, and that's when you can see, you know, everything will become beautiful. It's like the woman that's across the street, I mean, on the side of that building, I think there's a house for sale that's on 2 acres, they've got 2 acres for sale on that side.
Yep.
Then there's a sewing seamstress there.
Yep.
You can walk right, I mean, it's beautiful, you can walk in her backyard, you walk right to the river.
Yes. Yeah.
So now, if you want public access, you're gonna have to start from somewhere along that end. And then possibly take a sidewalk in the back along that whole area.
Yeah, so I think I think this is great feedback. I think the town staff should take your feedback and see what they can do. Right?
It's just ideas.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good feedback.
So one thing related to the river and Vista, I've never quite understand how we define that. Is it seeing water or is it seeing the tree on the river bank? As a clip, is that,
You're asking such a practical question.
not tonight, but the other thing is like, and are you seeing the river behind that property? Or could you like look past the next door property and see that river?
Because this stuff.
So I don't really understand how we're gonna be defining that. Like to have some definition of that.
Oh, this is.
Like objectives for,
Well, there, I mean, it's like I build this thing and say, well, you can give me this to the river. It's like, oh yeah, go put that road. You can see it. Stand right here and you look that way. Okay, you're good.
There'll be a little circle, we can get that property. So stand here, get the view.
Stand here,
river,
turn
view
right.
water.
Yeah.
Run through the net.
I don't know, I think,
quit your eyes.
I don't know, I mean, at some point we'll need guidance on that somehow, but.
I mean, I think that it is one of those things where it's kind of like up to reasonable minds. So I served on the planning board in my hometown. And there's a requirement in our sign bylaw that signs in the historic district had to be wood or wood-like. The wood-like was interpreted very broadly by some members of the planning board. I think that, here, what we've tried to do is in the purpose statement at the beginning, and then in the special permit criteria, very clearly state what the goals of redevelopment under this overlay district are. And then within the specific standards, so for example, the Vista pruning, saying that it's encouraged to create visual access to the river. So I think that it's okay, if you're comfortable with it, certainly, to leave it up to the board's discretion when reviewing specific projects to decide if the Assabet River means if you could see the blue of the water, if you can see the riverbank, if you can see, the boulder jutting out from the river, and just give yourselves a little bit of flexibility while still making sure that you're protected in the zoning language to actually ask for the things that you want to ask for.
Yeah. But that's a great start. I still think we need to put some work around what we mean by river access too. I have a couple other, do you have some other questions, comments?
I have a paired comment, which would be my last one. About the boundaries of the sub-districts. And I noticed that there's 2 current residential parcels that are getting a business overlay. And there's 1 business parcel getting a residential overlay. And regarding the residential parcels that are getting a business overlay, those are the guys on the northerly end of D. And I find it problematic from, well, say a social justice viewpoint, to stick business zoning 10 feet away from low income housing. So I would not be in favor of
So
overlay business zoning on top of a residential buffer to low income housing.
What is, I mean, right now, what is the zoning? Adjacent to it?
Residential,
No, adjacent to it.
residential,
Hmm,
those 2 parcels are residential.
oh, maybe immediately.
Business.
So they're currently residential properties, but what are they zoned, are they zoned?
Residential zone.
So the goal was particularly with D, was to encourage mixed use. And so if anything, at least the way that I looked at it was, we could potentially enhance where we have low income housing, that they would have access to potentially more businesses. Walkability would be greater because we could actually kind of force some
Yeah.
sidewalks on those areas that currently, if they were into the residential, you know, like we were saying before, we're trying to keep the residential requirements to the minimum. So we really wanted to try to encourage development, thoughtful development along those, particularly along the low income parts.
I think the residential properties stay all residential. The other odd one is 110 Powder Mill, the self-storage,
Yeah,
and it ends up being residential with all of our, with 3 other apartment complexes. That seems weird. It seems like it more wants to be a D or even an A. I don't know, why is it a B?
and that may be something we wanna change, you know,
Do
if
you
we
wanna-
go through it.
So this was, again, we went back and forth a lot here, Sarah.
Yeah, I can speak
Wait.
to that too.
Yeah, with particularly that lot and trying to figure out how we were gonna make it work. Then MBTA came up and really threw a curveball, into this area, because we were actually gonna end up doing more of it in B, and then we ended up just wanting to do Stratus. So then that's why it wasn't included in A, but if you wanna kind of talk more about particularly 110.
Yeah, sure. I can just give a brief overview of the thought process as I remember it. So as Julia said, the Prime Warehouse site was initially considered to be part of the 3A district. And actually can't see it on this map, but on one of the earlier maps. Are you able to see my cursor? Probably not.
1 second.
Maybe Julia can. So the diagonal boundary line between Acton and Maynard, the north side, the river side of Powder Mill Road, where there is subdistrict C. So on the Acton side, where there has been this proposed 40B development, those lots there, the like 4 or 5 lots there, that is a 3A district for Acton. So part of the idea was trying to have these kind of like higher density multifamily uses within proximity to each other in order to have that consistency of development. And then the reason why that tiny little parcel to the right of Prime Warehouse is blue is because then all the properties to the east of that on the Acton side are essentially that type of mixed use development that we're encouraging for subdistrict D. So, sorry?
And that's the Wendy's.
Yes, that's Wendy's. Thank you. Yeah, so so I really do think that that parcel could be open to different types of redevelopment, right? It could be strictly high density residential only, which is what it's currently imagined for. We could expand subdistrict A in terms of allowing the kind of large footprint commercial uses. We could also categorize it as subdistrict D if you wanted to extend that. So yeah, I'd be curious to hear board members' thoughts on that.
I don't want to exclude commercial. Maybe I certainly want to allow mixed, but I don't want to exclude commercial.
The one thing that you said, Sarah, that well, resonated with me was actually including, I'm not saying I want to include it with A, but using the A businesses that are allowed in A. That kind of makes sense to me. But I don't know if adding it as A is the answer. But I like the concept of either mixed uses or businesses there.
So maybe be more appropriate in, for example, D.
Well, that would be continuity from Acton, right? I mean, that's how the
Yeah.
corridor comes into town from Acton.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah, but it's a larger parcel
quite large.
So, I mean, it could be a larger residential parcel one day. As well.
Is that a real road on the side? Could they A and R that lot?
On which side?
Oh, Deer Path?
Town side, yeah. No, not the Deer Path, the one that goes into Old Stratus, no, not that one, on 110. 110 has the old access up to Stratus.
Oh, yeah.
Right here,
The paper road?
No.
No, the,
Right on,
Avenue.
right on the right side of, the storage facility.
Excellent.
In between
On
Wendy's
the
and.
town line,
Yeah, right there.
straight that property line goes straight up into Stratus. And it's a road, is that like a real road that they could A and R on? Or maybe could they
No,
A
it's
and R?
considered a
that's a driveway.
not considered a road.
Is Deer Hedge, can that
Yes.
lot be split easily? And meet,
You think-
Frontage
you
stuff?
think
Yeah.
Subdivision,
well, just, the back half of it
sure.
is zoned differently than the front half.
Sure.
Or maybe, maybe regardless of whether it has the frontage now, why not?
Right.
Maybe the back half is different than the front half, regardless.
This is a very good point.
I think the main difference too, between a lot of powder mill and particularly this is like, there's an existing business that, has been there for a while and doesn't seem to be going anywhere. However, we wanna make sure that if it does get sold, that we can have control over what's going on there. Without relying on A's development, or like our MBTA development. And also making sure that it blends nicely with just the amount of residential on that side. So if you're driving along and it's like residential, and then all of a sudden like this huge thing pops up. On that side of Powder Mill, is that what we wanna see kind of moving forward, or, we purposely kind of put that large scale development in A, because the feedback we were getting from the public was like. They were concerned about, what that would look like from a streetscape standpoint to go from residential to large scale commercial. So we can go back to.
Isn't B our tallest?
What?
I think A has our tallest heights.
Yeah.
Oh, well, A, certainly.
Yeah.
45. Yeah, so more to think about.
Okay.
But I think the board would like to see something more. I don't even know what the word is. Thoughtful is not the right word, because everything you've done has been very thoughtful, but maybe some more thought to allowing maybe more mixed or commercial use on that. parcel.
Okay,
That's what I put, yeah.
Chris wants an apartment above Wendy.
I didn't say.
I think the children of Acton were very upset because they're Wendy's. The only drive-through that everyone thinks is in Acton, but it's not. That's why it has drive-through. Acton does not allow drive-throughs.
Yes. I heard about that during
Mhm.
COVID for sure.
Yeah.
I have a very small thing that in the bicycle parking section, it says 30 and then 50 in parentheses.
9.7.9.1.
Not important, but I don't really care which it is. Both sound fine.
30 or is it?
I tried to look, I can't even see them in Acton. They're active somewhere else in other bylaws. They don't say anything about bicycles.
It's probably 30,
Okay.
Yeah.
and I just had fat fingers and did a 5 instead of a 3, but I'll double check.
That sounds great.
I have a couple items, for building heights, Julia or Bill, do you know what our DOD building heights is for the overlay district in the downtown? 45?
Is it
It is.
40 or 45? 45, that's it.
What's in the B?
B is 40.
Oh. Current B, not the proposed B,
Oh,
business district.
Oh, business.
Okay. What do we allow currently along the river?
I'm not sure if it's 35 or 40, let me look.
Just look at it over here.
My intuition or gut, it tells me that the D may wanna have a max height that's similar to the DOD number 45, because I kind of like what that has, the restriction on that has been. So maybe we should consider changing, sub-district D from 40 feet to 45 feet.
The building height in business district general is 35. In central business, is 40.
And then in DOD, it's, I believe it is 45.
DOD is 45, yep.
I mean, from an incentive standpoint, I think
That's what I'm
it
getting
needs
at.
to be 45.
That's what I'm getting at, yeah.
I don't think 40 is enough of an incentive.
Yeah, I think 45 needs, I think it has to be 45 for this to work better. For the sub-district D,
Okay,
maximum building.
For B, right?
Yeah,
No.
do you want that for B and for D, or just D as in dog?
You know, I've been thinking about it in terms of D as in dog, but
New D.
yeah, new D. But for the sub-district B, I haven't put as much thought to it, so I'm not sure.
What about
Okay,
I thought sub-district B, you know, those things were already that tall anyways, no?
I don't know.
They're pretty damn big.
they are,
Um,
especially on their like, when it's
on the hill?
on the hill,
Yes.
and then all of a sudden they shoot up even more. It's- You feel like they're twice the size.
yeah, I'm not sure about B, but I think for sub-district D as a dog,
Yeah,
we should have a height max of 45.
okay,
Cause then that can what, develop 3 stories? Right? Four potentially.
Yeah.
Depends on the property.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing too with the, when we've been speaking with like some of the developers, particularly on, let me use the cursor. Those that, let's see, particularly on these side, on this side of the, basically on between 20 and 86 Powder Mill, you have a significant change in topography from Powder Mill Road down to the river to the backyard. And so what we've been seeing people essentially propose is like, basically from the front or from the view of the street, it's maybe gonna look like a 2-story building. But from the back, it will look like a 4-story building because the way that they can
Build it up
navigate
with
and
the
drop.
Right.
Yeah, so I think like a perfect example of that is in South Acton. That's South Acton, where True North Brewery is. Is that West Acton? West Acton, thank you. So the West Acton like business center, so from the streetscape, it looks like a 2-story kind of business use. But then they were able to, you know, a lot of those buildings then go down in the back to 2 more stories, so. Yeah, we wanna definitely incentivize, I think by having a max height, they can still do a lot on the property, if they get creative, and that's what we would like them to do, we wanna encourage that creativity.
And then for sub-district E, it says 35 feet right now. I don't have as much of a feel for that, should that be 40 or is 35 the number? I just think about it,
It's business zone now.
some of them is in the DOD anyways.
The Alps, right?
No, this is not in the DOD. This is,
Oh, this is the ones just outside of it,
these.
Yeah, we
the
took-
DOD is
yeah,
excluded.
okay.
Yeah, because we didn't wanna overlay.
and
Why
I
not?
think part of the idea with the sub-district E height, if I remember correctly, is that the right of way is narrower at that
Yeah.
point, and so because the lots are shorter and buildings are closer to the road and there's a narrower road, then you just feel the impact of the higher heights in a different way than you would kind of further east on Powder Mill Road. So I think maybe some of the idea, again, if I'm remembering correctly, Bill, Julia, let me know if I'm wrong, was that there's some existing residential, I think like 1 and 2 family houses that are in sub-district C on that kind of south side of Powder Mill Road that maybe would feel that like towering effect if there was a taller building in sub-district E.
Yep, that's exactly the answer I was looking for.
Okay, good.
Okay, I'm gonna move on, under permitted and prohibited uses, 9.7.10. There are some uses that are not allowed in E, but are allowed in D. And for example, cocktail lounge, it's allowed in sub-district D, but not E.
We just delete that, by the way.
You just don't want cocktail lounges anyway?
Yeah.
And there's a couple other examples. Was there some reasoning to exclude some businesses from E? Do we remember?
Yes, there definitely was thought that went into which uses were in D versus E. If you are able, and it can be now, or if you want to send us an email later, if you could let us know where some of those discrepancies kind of caught your eye, then we can take a closer look at that.
That's fine. I was just curious.
Yeah. Yeah, some of it may have been thinking about what's allowed in the DoD. Some of it may have been looking at lot sizes and just like access. Yeah, but we can take a closer look.
Okay. Now I'm gonna skip ahead to 9.7.11. Actually, .1.12, the historic structures. And it references that. That the commission shall advise, and none of this will be binding, however, every effort shall be made to preserve historic structures. Is this a place where we could also look at in lieu of sort of stuff? If they do need to demolish historic sort of elements?
Well,
We have one,
yeah,
we
there's,
have one historic structure.
Oh,
we,
No, I think there's a few. Well, so this was very much language that I had put together. Because Acton does not have known historic structures. So this is not adopted from Acton. This is actually taking some existing language from your zoning bylaw that actually has a great definition of what a historic structure is. And trying to create this advisory review process with the historical commission. So recognizing that there are currently no binding review processes from the commission, so not wanting to kind of go all the way in that direction. But using some kind of softer language about every effort shall be made. And then, as you were mentioning, if structures are demolished or altered, the commission may request documentation. So that's kind of like the mitigation component of that. So I think, it's kind of up to you if you want to make it stronger or more specific, but this was kind of a place to start.
I was just thinking of in other parts of our bylaw, when mitigation is required, we have done some type of in lieu or in kind language. That allows just a different path, so I was just curious if there's a different path to allow for. The developer to say, we can't keep this, but here's $10,000 to the historical commission or something.
What, and Sarah can speak on this more as her experience with historical preservation planning, but we really don't want to go in same within environmental planning, we really want to go away from in lieu of. Because then if you have a lot of money, you can get rid of history. So just like from a language perspective, if you have a lot of money, you can destroy wetlands and put it over there, or stay within affordable housing, like you can not put housing in your building, you put it in lieu of somewhere else where, you would rather the affordable housing go. So that's just, in general, we're trying to move away from that language,
Okay.
that we have in our current.
Now down to green stormwater infrastructure. Should there be any consideration about using different pervious materials? Usually we have a calculation of impervious material that's being added, and then look at it from that standpoint. I'm thinking of the business overlay district, where we have tried to always minimize the amount of impervious soils or surfaces. So I know it's green stormwater infrastructure, but the point is, should we consider adding incentives for pervious materials? And I don't need an answer.
I will say, I sat in on a conversation that the Acton planners had with their conservation agent and their town engineer, where they were going through what kind of specific standards they would want to require. And so that's where this language came from in terms of the green stormwater infrastructure and the types of interventions. Julia and I have also had many conversations about the differences between the flexibility that's allowed through the conservation regulations and the specificity that's often required in zoning. But we can definitely take a look at some of the other language about pervious surfaces and see if there's a way where that can coexist and make sure that that's explicit.
So right now, under our stormwater management regulations, redevelopment of a 10,000 square foot lot triggers our stormwater management regulations where we go very in depth. Otherwise, if you're within the jurisdiction of the riverfront area, then you trigger Massachusetts state stormwater standards, which, like, and Sarah and I have gone back and forth on this, on like green infrastructure, because like technically a storm acceptor is green infrastructure. That's different from bio-based infrastructure, such as swales and constructed wetlands. But yeah,
Why do we need that?
Because it gives guidance for people who don't meet either of those things.
yeah,
This
so
is for lots under 10,000 square feet.
basically. Yeah, so if they kind of slip through all the other cracks.
Is this enough?
It's just a way of trying to get some stormwater, regs and yeah. However, I really don't see that. I mean, there's like maybe one or two lots that this could potentially cover, but for the most part, they're either within the riverfront jurisdiction or they're above 10,000 square feet, so they need it. They have to follow certain regulations. And also keep in mind that it's not just the river, there is also wetlands behind a lot of those houses.
Right.
So then there's the 100-foot buffer zone that then comes out. So for example, like a lot of the Stratus, not a lot, the corner of the Stratus campus near the storage unit and behind Wendy's is like one big wetland, so.
Yeah, so I'm not seeing a whole lot of value in this, and if it does stay, I'd like some, I don't know, guidance or rules or something about what's the proper proportion of green infrastructure. I mean, it's like, ooh, I did a tree line, I'm good.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, that came up in the conversation with Acton too, because it's very hard to put conservation regulations and zoning is what I've learned through this process. And so I think what they had settled on was identifying specific interventions that they would like to see and then requiring at least one of them. And then Julia, correct me if I'm wrong, that would go into kind of like the complex matrix of calculations and requirements, but that you're kind of forcing the hand for at least one aspect of it, if not all of it. Julia, is that appropriate? Does that make sense?
And Maynard's, Maynard's is a little bit different from Acton since they, I think, are still under the acre threshold, and we went down to 10,000 square feet threshold to trigger stormwater standards. Because where do we have an acre lot?
Yeah.
So yes, I think there is some reiteration that's maybe unnecessary.
does our current rules apply to residential?
No. However,
With this?
if you're within the riverfront area, you mean conservation or, sorry, are you talking about which is a overlay district?
I don't know, if I'm over on Crane Ave right now, and I get 10,000 square feet and I do something, do I have to, under our current rules?
Yes,
Have to do one of these green?
Because you're above
things?
10,000.
yeah, so under our,
If
you
I'm
would
not
have,
at 10,000.
if you're redeveloping 10,000 square feet, you have to either come and get a waiver, under the stormwater management bylaw, or meet the stormwater management standards of Matrix.
What if you're under 10,000 square feet?
Then you do not.
Okay, So you said that this is only a couple properties.
Yeah, so when those residential, it's almost all of our residential properties, are very small over there.
Right.
So it's really those commercial properties and then the residential ones that happen to be.
But the proposed text would now apply to all those little residential properties.
No. At least that was not my intent.
The zoning, so let's see. The site and building design standards that we put together in this zoning would apply to all use categories. So if you would like to exempt a use, then we can talk about that. And this goes back to what we were talking about too, in terms of what triggers complying with this kind of suite of standards.
Yeah, I think I would want to add exempting residential uses out of a lot of these things.
But like all residential or just
Only residential, you mean?
small
Yeah.
scale?
Single family,
Single family.
yeah,
Yeah, because you were combining the less than 10,000 in single family, right? Yeah.
yes, yeah,
Right.
so, because for me, it doesn't matter what the use is, it's all about square footage.
Right.
And then, I should say that, it matters, once you trigger square footage, then you end up, there's like a residential. Stormwater standard and a commercial stormwater standard.
When you're saying square foot, you're talking lot size, not building size.
Correct, yep, yeah, so disturbance on a lot. So a lot of times, the waivers that we see are, someone has a 10,000 square foot lot, but they're not disturbing 10,000 square feet. They're rebuilding a house in this one corner of their lot. And usually we give them a waiver for that, to not have to meet all stormwater standards, because they're not completely redeveloping their lot. So it's not a perfect process, and that's why we do have the waiver system. But yeah, I think with the infrastructure, we can hash that out a little bit more.
My last comments are about the sustainability section. It looks like it just has two parts. One is electric charging vehicles requirement, and then two is about the lead construction standards. Is the electric charging, is that just reiterating what's going to be the requirement anyways?
Yes, Sarah, my understanding is that, because we rewrote this before we had voted on opt-in charge code.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
If this is just reiterating the
Yeah.
opt-in, we don't need it,
Right.
I'm like 99%,
right?
but
Yeah,
can
we can
double-
double check.
If the intent of, if the intent of this team here was to add something on top, then it's fine. But if it's just a reiteration, I think we don't need it.
would you guys want to go smaller, or are
Um,
you good with the 10 threshold? I'd like, I think,
I mean, for me, this is more of a town-wide item than specificity towards the Powder Mill corridor.
okay,
We can consider it some more, but
Especially since it's a disincentive.
yeah,
we're also looking at,
it just doesn't align with the, like, I would rather that be a full town-wide.
Yeah.
Item.
we also, level two chargers aren't
We can
great
get-
again, so I think trying to incentivize, like if someone wants to put in a supercharging station, that's more of an incentive, but they're,
Right.
They're not allowed.
yeah.
Right.
So yeah, I think we can just double check on that to make sure that we're not being
And then
less.
the lead new construction low emitting materials, remind me, that's just a requirement for low VOC emissions for building materials for the interior of the building.
Correct, which I also think is the reiterating the new opt-in structure.
Right. So if that's the case, I don't think we need to reiterate opt-in stretch code stuff.
Okay.
That makes sense.
And related to stuff that's gonna take effect soon, does that mean we don't need accessory dwelling? Stop calling again, accessory apartment. We've already taking care of that.
I don't know. Unless we wanted to consider.
Yeah, so we would change the language on that.
Oh,
The leader, right?
oh, in the table.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, why would it be a special permit?
right,
Anywhere else in the world.
right, yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Before time.
Mind you, we started this 3 years ago.
Yeah, no, of course.
Sorry, I missed that. What was the comment?
Accessory apartment is now accessory dwelling unit, we just passed that at town meeting. And now we allow that.
It should just match, it should just, you know.
Oh, okay, so that's now allowed by right throughout the town?
Yeah.
And all residential
Um,
units.
And
Yeah.
And I think all of these districts here would be generally,
but the terminology,
but you guys know what we're getting.
Yeah, so we.
Okay.
we-
Yep.
that.
Thank you.
In general, I like I like the details here, and I like that they're a lot, the details are aligned with where the properties are sort of located, with the map that Sarah has up now with the crosshatch, like, I think that's a very elegant way to approach it, so I like that concept. I'm gonna spend more time thinking about the incentives here and thinking more about, you know, what are the categories under each of these different areas? For example, building siting is under the under the rivers along the Assabet River, but we might want to have some guidance on building siting overall for other districts and other areas as well, so. I'm gonna put more thought to this myself. But generally, I think this is really well in the right direction, is my final thought. So, thank you. Any other comments? For tonight?
Sure, why not? One is, I always think the parking should be just townwide and not overlay. But, one thing that definitely needs a look is the text on affordable housing requirements. It's the MBTA text that only applies to a district. It doesn't apply in the. Well,
So,
matter of fact, everything after the first sentence only applies to. The A sub-district. And the B, C, D, and E should just be the current inclusionary that applies everywhere else in town. But we had to lower the requirements for the A. Because they would let us keep on current ones.
yeah, so I think there we could, because we can't really touch 9.7.6, but we can add an additional paragraph to talk about affordable housing requirements in the other.
And bring it.
Yeah, we just have to clarify, because the current text is only applying to A, and we have to make sure that. You know, we'll need two paragraphs, one that
Yeah.
applies only to A. and one
Yeah, and what that
the
applies
other
to
one
everyone.
is
Yeah,
Go by,
which is annoying,
go
but
by the basic.
yeah.
inclusion.
I think that 9.7.6 does apply to the whole district. Unless otherwise specified, the town's inclusionary zoning bylaw shall apply to the Powder Mill overlay district.
I thought it did when we said that if, and then we qualified because. We weren't sure what we were gonna get for the relief, or from the relief, from the, whatever we're gonna call it, the.
The EFA.
Yeah, it's not relief, if,
The feedback from the Commonwealth.
yeah, the feedback from the Commonwealth.
Shouldn't we, once we have the feedback from the Commonwealth finalized, shouldn't we just rewrite this anyways to get rid of all that if and then statements?
They actually seemed okay with the language when we talked to E EOHLC.
Yeah, the Commonwealth was okay with it.
Yeah, but it's just a little clunky for us.
It'd be weird looking at it 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Just have to be careful of what's being changed.
and we still don't have the official from ESC on it.
This might be a 3-year conversation. Right. I get
Yeah.
That's why, we'll take a look at that and potentially having a separate
But
area.
you guys get what Bill's saying. But we just gotta make sure that.
I do think
It's all
that-
being-
Well, we said two things.
The first sentence does say, unless otherwise specified, as it's then does.
Right,
That's fine, yeah.
But then the next thing says it's 20%. And that's not true, it's only 20% in A.
That's true.
It's up to 25 everywhere else. So the first sentence should just say blah, 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 applies to the PMOD, B, C, D, and E. And then the next line says in applicable projects in POMDA. And then we have.
And that's the
current
20%,
text.
yeah.
Yeah. Right, and you can just,
It's just 2 paragraphs.
Yeah.
One is a single sentence.
What else?
Do we really need the parcel list?
Yeah.
We can't do that with a map.
No. You wanna know why?
just leave it.
Because we have-
But I wanna
Julia
know
will
why-
die on this hill.
I will that.
Why don't we do that in our other overlays?
Don't get us started.
Great question.
Don't.
All right,
I
I
believe-
withdraw.
I believe you.
I withdraw that question.
Because people can slip and include parcels that should be included or forget parcels that need to be included. And so then we have to play the game of every time someone comes in and being like, are you included? I don't know, let me like zoom in, so it's a lot easier with parcel numbers. So hopefully moving forward, you'll see that and that will slowly start to get corrected through our other.
I do not want 4 pages of zoning text to be a single column of numbers. That's not,
We can figure out different ways.
I mean, we're just making it easier for staff, and it shouldn't be done this way.
Well, I'm sure that there's a different way that we can.
Can you stick it in the back? I don't know.
I'm sure we can come up with some else, this is for working draft.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. We hear it.
But I'm looking forward to parcel numbers being applied to the DOD. Because it's very relevant to my life.
And
But then if we split parcels, they get new numbers, or they get sub numbers, and suddenly it doesn't apply to them anymore.
they,
Like, oh, okay, I got 117.0, now I made it into 117.1 and 117.2, so it doesn't apply, because that number's not on the table.
so when we split lots, we always add a point to it, so it would be like 0.1. Or so if it's,
Exactly, but that point is not
BA.
on this table, and we would have to update that table with that new sub number. And you don't have to do that with a map.
it would be supplemented with it. But it's important to have those parcel numbers in there.
There might be a way to solve this with some creativity, I think. That's not at
It's a,
9:37 PM. But yeah, I think you guys get the idea.
Mhm.
It's clunky to look at.
yeah,
And
We're trying to make sure that zoning goes based on parcel lines, not,
Arbitrary one.
we get that. I think we all get that part.
which is a great book, and we should all. Arbitrary lines. Or the,
Can you check if there's any members of the public that would like to, I know it's not a hearing, but I'll take any public comments.
Okay.
All right, I'll open up for public comments. Anyone that wants to provide a public comment, use the raise hand feature. And we'll hear the public comments either online or here in the room. Any final comments from the board?
What's the expectation? Between now and whatever?
Bill, you said you wanted a schedule for the fall, so what's the expectations?
no, I didn't say that. I said it was, I said that was our original. I think it's an artificial.
we lose MAPC in June.
Hmm?
We lose Sarah in June.
Yeah, so.
So are the comments from tonight gonna be addressed by?
Well, I think these are draft comments that we should certainly incorporate by our, before Sarah leaves, yeah.
Yes, I can definitely work with town staff to incorporate these comments. And I think that's where I can be most helpful, is thinking about some of the bigger picture questions and making sure that the zoning is plugged into the recommendations from phase one and the community engagement, all of that work. I think that some of the questions about aligning zoning standards with the Conservation Commission regulations, or with the development thresholds for what triggers requirement with different types of rules. I think those would probably, honestly, I don't really know your procedures as well as you do. So I think that, you know, if it's a matter of prioritizing some versus the others, then I think we can do that in the next few weeks. And then the other thing that I'm working on is putting together just kind of like a final report that covers the work that we did with both of the towns. And then also putting together just kind of like a maybe brochure, or kind of like 1 or 2 page flyer that town staff can hand out to property owners or developers, kind of prospective applicants, to really kind of hammer home the ideas about the purpose of the development outcomes that the town's looking for. So I will be delivering those 2 items in addition to the revised draft zoning before the end of June.
Thank you, Sarah.
Cool.
Really
Yeah.
appreciate this.
Thank you all. I really appreciate your attention to detail and your thoughtful comments. It's supremely helpful.
Supremely.
Yeah, well, thanks again. I think we have a couple other items, but I think,
Okay,
you're welcome to stay, Sarah, but you're welcome to leave too.
I appreciate the offer. I will leave you to your business.
Thank you,
Thanks, Sarah.
Have a
Okay.
good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bill, planner update?
Well, I don't think there's anything at the moment that's, unless I'm missing something.
Okay, Julia, planner update.
No, that's it. Bean.
One thing I just wanted to find out was I would like, once you get that language, to either have you guys invite conservation or go to the conservation meeting. I will not be here, so I can't coordinate that, but I want to make sure that the conservation gives formal invite.
Yeah, yes, that's a great idea.
So keep that in mind. I won't be here for you.
You get a conversation with me and Susan started, and then we'll.
Yeah, she was on the
Yeah.
call tonight. I invited her on purpose. And
Yeah, maybe we'll just talk with her and get the conversation started, and then whenever the appropriate time is. Figure that out.
Great.
Because I don't want to go too early, because things are still kind of changing, but don't want to go too early either, so we'll get it.
Yeah, particularly on like some of the language stuff, but also, you know, at the end of the day, the AG will potentially that are truly cross jurisdictional. So there's a lot of mechanisms that needs in place to catch this.
We'll figure it out, right? Great idea. That's it, seriously, nothing else?
No, next meeting, as I said, there's kind of a advertising snafu, so we're not gonna hear it, we'll open it and continue one of the items. I think that's the only thing we have on the next one. Probably
We have a lot of things in the behind the scenes, yeah.
Food trucks?
Well,
Wow.
So the next meeting, we don't have anything to do except we continue.
I'm not positive on that, Bill. I have to,
I think,
well, I can look real
I
quick.
think Hillside was continued to the first meeting.
Hillside, we have Hillside, yeah. That's what it is. Yeah.
Okay, would anyone like to do the honors since Jim is with us tonight?
Oh, Jim, by the way, Jim called, or he wrote, he fell. And he said he's okay, but he didn't feel good enough to come over.
So he fell trying to get to planning board and is blaming us.
That's the way I read it, yeah. No,
Oh, yeah.
it was yesterday. He was answering the email from the planning board.
Then-
But I see, it seems to be okay. I'll check on tomorrow and let everybody know.
Always blame Bill. Yeah. Okay, anyone want to do the honors?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second that. All in favor to adjourn the meeting, please raise your hand. Thank you. 5-0 to adjourn.